So you've optimized your career, your health, and even your grocery list. But if you treat the final 5 years before an early retirement like a victory lap, you could be quietly sabotaging everything you've built. In fact, as a financial advisor that works with folks that retire early, I see the last 5 years before you retire as one of the most overlooked and misunderstood phases of your entire financial life. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build on everything you've already worked for and use these final 5 working years as a launchpad for a confident, purpose-filled, and well-funded early retirement. So let's jump right in. So I actually want to take a step back here and start by flipping the script because most people jump straight into the numbers. But the most effective early retirees I work with, they begin with a vision. Now that might sound all woo-woo, but here is the first question I want you to answer, and seriously, write this down. And the question is, what are you not able to do now that you can do once you retire? So take a moment, and if you're married, have your spouse answer this separately, then compare notes. I think you'll be surprised what shows up when you actually put it on paper. But why would I even start with this question? Why is this question even important? Now, if you're imagining traveling, remodeling, or buying something like a second home, those things need to be factored into your plan now while you still have the income and flexibility to start to plan ahead. Secondly, when a lot of people get to this 5-year mark, they most likely are in the best possible position with some of their highest income years and job status, where it's the first time in decades where you finally have the space to start thinking beyond the grind. Maybe your kids are grown, your career has peaked, and for the first time, this dream of retirement is really within reach. You don't want to be 1 year into retirement realizing you built a financial plan for a life that you don't actually want. So if you can identify your post-career priorities now, you gain clarity around what your retirement really costs, and that lets you direct your money and time towards what matters most. This 10-minute exercise now can save you years of regret later. It's simple, but it's one of the most powerful ways to begin this 5-year turning point. Okay, so let's talk about something that's really important. Let's say that you've started to define what an early retirement looks like. Let's start to connect that vision to your financial reality, because the next part might actually surprise you, and it's that your final 5 working years before retirement are often your most powerful for building wealth. Not the first 5 years out of college, not the middle of your career, the last 5. And a lot of people, naturally, I get it, you treat it as like a financial cool down. They assume it's too late to change the outcome or their portfolio is set. But let me show you why that mindset could cost you. And a classic example is one of my favorite investors of all time, Warren Buffett, with a net worth of over $140 billion. But there's something that not that many people know about, and that's that more than 99% of that net worth came after age 65. Morgan Housel, the author of The Psychology of Money, explains that Buffett's real edge isn't just investing skill, it's time. Had Buffett retired at 65, you probably would have never actually heard of him. The point isn't that you need Warren Buffett's money or his investment strategy, but you can use the same principle. And it's that some of the greatest compounding was able to take place later in his life when his investments were bigger and able to compound on top of each other. And if we look at a realistic early retirement example, let's take Mike and Karen, both age 55, plan to retire at 60. They've done well for themselves. They've saved over $750,000 across their investment accounts. They're still working. They're in their peak earning years. And they're finally getting serious about retirement and what that could look like. Now, what's surprising is that if each of them just max out their 401ks, including catch-up contributions at around $35,000 a piece, and they average just 7.3% investment returns over the next 5 years, that $750,000 could double to nearly $1.5 million. That's not by an inheritance or selling a business or chasing risky investments. It's just by fully using the tools available right now during this crucial turning point. So yes, this final stretch is really important where you can actually double your nest egg, but only if you approach it with the urgency and clarity that this window deserves. Okay, so you might also be saying, all right, Matt, or maybe you're asking yourselves, okay, maybe I do hit 1.5 million or 2 million or whatever number that you have. One of the big questions lingers is, will it be enough? Because once you stop working, the paycheck stops too. And if you haven't nailed your cash flow plan, it's incredibly hard to course correct later. You want to get this right now, especially when you have 5 years to go. So here's a simple model I recommend as a great starting point, and it's built off 2 basic steps. All right, step number 1, know what hits your bank account each month while you're working, right? Instead of guessing, hey, here's this expense and that expense, which by the way, a lot of people really underestimate them, start by looking at what actually lands in your bank account each month. And what you do is take a look at your paycheck, look at your net pay after 401k contributions, payroll taxes, and then adjust for what you'll still owe in income tax during retirement. Now, this gives you a real baseline for what you're living on now without guessing. And don't forget, some expenses might go away, like maybe you're saving into a brokerage account, maybe you have a mortgage that might get paid off, or other expenses like a lot more commuting, traveling, while other things like healthcare or travel might increase, right? Especially if you plan to retire early. The US healthcare system can be a little tricky, which we're gonna talk about in this video because it's really important. This method gives you a clean, reality-based estimate without obsessing over spreadsheets at this point. But step number 2 is know your income sources. Now ask, where will your income come from once you stop working? Will it be Social Security? Will it be a pension, rental income, or a portfolio? Likely probably a mix of both for many of you guys watching. For example, if you need $10,000 per month and your income sources only cover $4,000 of that, the rest will need to come from your investments, and you'll need a plan for taxes on that portfolio income as well. And one really great bonus tip in these final years is make it a goal to pay off any lingering debts, cars, HELOCs, credit cards before you retire. Big expenses like roofs, cars, maintenance, medical procedures, 5 years before you retire early is a great time to start tackling those while you have the income and while you have the insurance. Because when you reverse engineer your retirement cash flow based on what hits your bank account today and match that with your actual income, all the income source you'll have for tomorrow, you start to eliminate the guesswork. And more importantly, you start to eliminate that anxiety of, can I do this? Am I on track? This one shift can give you a totally different level of confidence as you're getting closer and closer to retirement. So this next section, really important and really specifically to early retirees, and it's one of the big 3 expenses in retirement, right? We have taxes, housing, and of course, healthcare. Now, out of these 3, healthcare tends to cause a lot of anxiety, especially among early retirees. Because if you're retiring before 65, there's a big Medicare gap just sitting right in front of your face that you have to plan for. From age 60 to 65, you might be without employer coverage, too young for Medicare, and you have to start finding insurance options that could cost as much as a second mortgage. And many retirees don't even realize how exposed they are until they've already handed in their resignation. And failing to plan for this can add thousands to your annual expenses, or worse, cause you to delay retirement because you weren't aware. The good news is you can absolutely take control of this, and planning ahead the 5 years before you retire is a great option. The earlier you start, the better. But here are 3 high impact moves to consider right now as you're getting closer to that next chapter. Number 1 is to max out your HSA. Now, if you're eligible and it makes sense for your family, contributing to an HSA gives you a triple tax benefit. Right? You get a deduction, you get tax-free growth, and then tax-free withdrawals for qualified medical expenses. You can use these years to supersize it, so by the time you need it, you have tax-free withdrawals for medical expenses. Number 2 is take elective procedures now. I have clients who are getting important surgeries done now while they are still on their employer plans, which is a really smart move. Now, evaluate your own situation, what's worth doing while the coverage is good. And thirdly, of course, is to plan for that coverage gap. Now, COBRA might help, or you may need to go to the exchange. Now, it's hard to navigate exactly what will be available 5 years from now. Either way, factoring in the costs and planning for it now, not after the fact, and maybe perhaps being conservative estimating higher costs, that way you'll be pleasantly surprised if things aren't as expensive. So if you take these steps in your final 5 working years, front-loading your HSA, knocking out elective care, and building a solid plan for that Medicare gap, you'll eliminate one of the biggest early retirement stressor and potentially save thousands on medical costs and set yourself up for a healthier, smoother transition into retirement. Okay, so lastly, now you've spent decades growing your wealth, but once you retire, the rules sort of start to change. Now, what do I mean by that? Because the day you stop working is the day your portfolio has to start creating your new paycheck. But the trap is, and I see this all the time, especially with early retirees, people build their investment strategy around risk tolerance surveys or generic advice like, hey, be conservative when you retire. But they miss the real question, and that is, how much income do you actually need from your portfolio, and when do you need that income? Now, if you get that wrong, one of two things I see happen, right? Number one is you go way too conservative and lose purchasing power to inflation, or number two, you go way too aggressive. You forget to change your investments and you end up making a big mistake. Neither one supports the kind of confidence, flexibility in retirement that you've actually earned. So one of my favorite quotes, and this is by Nick Murray, famous author, and he says, you can protect your principal or your purchasing power, not both. That statement could not be more true. It's especially interesting when we break this down and we look at some data here. And first of all, we can see that even though you retire, inflation never retires. If we take a look at this chart of the consumer price index, essentially inflation, and we compare it to bonds as represented by ag, over the past 10 years, inflation exceeded bond returns. And then if we look at 15 years, the same thing happened. It takes 20 years, we start to see the spread. That's a slow leak to your lifestyle if you become way too conservative. Now look at equities like the S&P 500. Yes, there were steep drawdowns, over 40% in some years, but it also delivered the best chance to grow your wealth over time. And it's even more interesting when we compare it to inflation and bonds over a 20-year period. So what do? Do you avoid bonds entirely? No, that's not the answer. This is the allocation strategy I use with many early retirees. I'm going to simplify it, but it's a conservative bucket for the first few years of income. For example, if you need income from the portfolio of $10,000 per month, that's $120,000 per year. Perhaps you bucket 3 years of income, so $360,000 in more conservative investments like cash and bonds. They're not going to grow a ton, but it's going to be there when stocks are down 30 to 40%. Then you have a growth bucket for money you won't need for another 5, 10, or even 15 years. So that bucket can ride things out and help your money grow for the long term, just like how we saw over the past 20 years. The key is that your allocation isn't just based on your age. It's based on your withdrawal need. Now, sequence of returns risk, which is basically bad returns early on in retirement, can derail your plan if you don't have that first bucket of conservative investments. This is why your portfolio should reflect how much income you need to withdraw. Then you start to layer on your tolerance for risk. The 5 years before retirement are your chance to reposition your portfolio, not just for growth, but for purpose. When you align your allocation to your income needs, you give yourself something better than peace of mind. You give yourself a plan you can trust when the market really decides to test you. And that's the kind of plan that you can retire early on and stay retired. So these points are why those 5 years matter so much. This isn't just your final lap, it's a turning point. Make the right moves and launch into retirement with clarity, purpose, and peace of mind. But if you want help building a retirement income plan that's built for you, your goals, not some outdated rule of thumb, my team of certified financial planners would love to chat. Just click the link in the description below and schedule a call. We'd love to talk with you.